An unexpected encounter. The crystalline dome of Starbase Horizon's recreation deck stretched above Commander Julian Nash like a transparent bubble separating him from the infinite void of space. After 3 months of intensive diplomatic missions, he had finally found a moment of solitude. The station's renowned aquatic center beckoned with its promises of relaxation. The facility was deserted at this late hour, just as he preferred. Julian ran his hand through his dark hair, still regulation cut despite his recent promotion to diplomatic liaison. His athletic frame, maintained despite countless hours behind a desk, reflected in the pool's surface as he approached the edge. The water itself was unlike anything he'd seen on Earth, a shifting mix of blues and purples that seemed to respond to movement with subtle patterns of light. Some advanced Centaurian technology, he assumed, designed to maintain perfect cleanliness while creating an aesthetically pleasing environment. As he slipped into the pool, the liquid embraced him with an unusual warmth. It felt almost alive, responding to his movements with gentle pulses of bioluminescence. The sensation was foreign yet soothing, and Julian found himself floating peacefully, watching the stars through the dome above. His solitude was interrupted by a soft splash from the far end of the pool. Julian turned, expecting to see another late-night swimmer, but what he saw instead made him forget all about diplomatic protocols and military bearing. She emerged from the water like a living aurora, her skin a cascade of shifting colors that rippled from deep azure to brilliant violet. Her features were humanoid but ethereally beautiful, with large eyes that seemed to contain entire nebulae. Her hair, if it could be called that, moved like liquid starlight. "I hope I'm not disturbing your peace," she said, her voice carrying musical undertones that seemed to resonate with the water itself. "I'm Naira. I didn't expect to find anyone else here at this hour." Julian found himself momentarily speechless, his usual diplomatic eloquence deserting him. "I'm Commander Julian Nash," he managed finally. "And no, you're not disturbing anything. I've just never seen." He gestured vaguely at her chromatic display. Naira laughed, the sound causing ripples of gold to cascade across her skin. "A Luminian. We tend to have that effect on humans. Your kind is so wonderfully expressive with your reactions. Some species barely acknowledge our appearance at all." She glided closer through the water, moving with an impossible grace that made Julian acutely aware of his own comparatively clumsy movements. "Your species fascinates me, Commander. So young in the grand scheme of things, yet so quick to adapt, to embrace the unknown." "Please, call me Julian," he said, finding his composure. "And I could say the same about your people. I've heard stories about the Luminians, but I've never had the pleasure of meeting one in person." "Stories?" Naira's skin shifted to a curious shade of turquoise. "Good ones, I hope. Mostly about your achievements in bioengineering and your mastery of light-based technologies. Though clearly they left out how." He paused, searching for an appropriately diplomatic word. "How we glow." She finished with another musical laugh. "It's more than just an aesthetic feature, you know. Every shift in color, every ripple of light, it's all part of how we communicate, how we experience the world." She moved closer, close enough that Julian could see the intricate patterns flowing beneath her surface. "For instance, right now, my colors are telling quite an interesting story about my reaction to you." Julian felt his heart rate quicken. And what story would that be? Instead of answering directly, Naira reached out and touched his shoulder. Where their skin met, her colors swirled into new patterns, creating a mesmerizing display. "Why don't you try to figure it out?" she suggested, her eyes twinkling with something that transcended species barriers. The water around them began to pulse with a soft light, responding to their interaction. Julian realized with a start that what he had assumed was some sort of technological feature was actually responding to Naira's presence. "The pool. It's alive." "In a way," she confirmed. "It's a specialized biological medium we Luminians use for relaxation and connection." She emphasized the last word with a subtle shift of color that sent shivers down Julian's spine. It enhances our natural abilities while providing a comfortable environment for other species. As if to demonstrate, she swept her hand through the water, creating trails of light that danced and swirled around them like aurora ribbons. The display was breathtaking, but Julian found his attention drawn back to Naira herself, to the way her colors seemed to intensify whenever their eyes met. "You know," he said, surprising himself with his boldness, "I came here looking for a quiet swim, but I think I found something far more interesting." Naira's skin flickered with pleased amusement. "Sometimes the most significant discoveries happen when we least expect them, Commander Nash. The question is..." She moved even closer, her bioluminescence creating patterns that seemed to reach out toward him. "What do you plan to do with this particular discovery, luminous attraction?" The following days aboard Starbase Horizon took on a dreamlike quality for Julian. His diplomatic duties continued as usual, but his evenings belonged to Naira. Their nightly meetings in the aquatic center became something he looked forward to with an intensity that both thrilled and concerned him. Tonight, Naira was teaching him about Luminian culture, her skin shifting through spectrums of blue and green as she spoke. "Our society is built on the principle of emotional transparency," she explained, creating intricate patterns in the living water around them. "We can't hide our feelings. They're literally written on our skin." Julian watched, fascinated as waves of color rippled across her form. "That must make diplomacy interesting," he mused, thinking of the many times he had to maintain a poker face during negotiations. Naira's laugh sent sparkles of gold through her luminescence. "You have no idea. It's why we rarely serve as direct negotiators. Instead, we're valued as truth sensors. No one can lie to a Luminian. Their emotional state always gives them away." The implications of this hit Julian suddenly. "So you've been reading my emotional state this entire time?" He felt a mix of vulnerability and intrigue at the thought. "Yes," she admitted, her skin taking on a soft rose hue that he was beginning to recognize as embarrassment. "And you've been remarkably honest in your reactions." The patterns across her skin became more complex, interweaving in ways that made his breath catch. Julian moved closer, drawn by the hypnotic display. "And what are my reactions telling you?" Instead of answering directly, Naira reached out and touched his chest. Where her hand made contact, her bioluminescence seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Your physiology is fascinating," she murmured. "So different from ours, yet somehow compatible in ways I never expected." The water around them began to glow more intensely, responding to their proximity. Julian had learned that the living pool was sensitive to emotional energy, particularly that of Luminians. The increasing brightness told its own story about their growing connection. "There's something you should know," Naira said, her voice taking on a more serious tone as patterns of deep purple threaded through her luminescence. "This connection between us. It's not just unusual, it's unprecedented. Luminians can bond with other species, but not like this. The pool's reaction to our combined presence is something I've never seen before." Julian felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Is that a problem?" "Not exactly," she replied, her colors shifting rapidly in what he recognized as agitation. "But it's attracted attention. The Luminian Science Council has noticed our interactions. They're interested in studying this phenomenon." "Studying us, you mean?" Julian's diplomatic instincts kicked in. "What kind of studying?" Naira's skin rippled with reassuring patterns of soft green. "Nothing invasive. They're mostly interested in the energy patterns we create together. You see, Luminians have been searching for ways to deepen our connections with other species for centuries. We believe it's key to advancing interstellar relations, and somehow, without trying, we've achieved something remarkable." As if to demonstrate, she intertwined her fingers with his. Where their skin met, her bioluminescence created patterns more complex and beautiful than any he'd seen before. The water around them began to sing. There was no other word for it, a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through his very being. "This shouldn't be possible," she whispered, wonder evident in her voice. Our biochemistries are completely different. Our neural patterns shouldn't be able to sync like this, but she gestured at the spectacular light show their touch had created. Julian found himself smiling. I'm learning that shouldn't be possible often means we just haven't tried hard enough yet. He squeezed her hand gently, watching as new patterns bloomed across her skin in response. The council wants to meet with you, she said suddenly, her colors betraying her nervousness. They believe our connection could be the key to revolutionizing human-Luminian relations, but her skin darkened slightly. It would mean making our private interactions very public. Julian considered this, his diplomatic training warring with his personal feelings. What do you want? He asked finally. Naira's skin cycled through several colors before settling on a deep, rich purple he'd never seen before. I want to understand this connection between us. I want to explore it fully. But I also want to protect it. The Council's interest could either nurture what we found or, she trailed off, her colors dimming slightly, or turn it into a scientific curiosity. Julian finished. He understood her concern. He'd seen too many genuine breakthroughs become tangled in political and scientific agenda. Exactly, she sighed, creating ripples of concerned indigo in the water. And there's more. Some members of my species believe we shouldn't be pursuing deeper connections with other races at all. They think it dilutes our cultural purity. Her skin flickered with patterns of frustration. Julian pulled her closer, watching as her colors responded instantly to his touch. Then we'll have to prove them wrong, he said softly. Show them that understanding between species only makes both cultures stronger. The water around them pulsed with renewed energy as Naira's skin blazed with sudden hope. You'd be willing to face that kind of scrutiny, to become a test case for interspecies relations. I'm a diplomat, he reminded her with a smile. It's literally my job to build bridges between different cultures. Though I have to admit, he traced a pattern on her luminescent skin, watching the colors follow his touch. I've never enjoyed my diplomatic duties quite this much before. Naira's answering laugh sent cascades of joyful color through the pool, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that matched the deepening of their connection. Whatever came next, they both knew their private paradise of midnight swims was about to change dramatically, crossing boundaries. The Luminian Science Council chamber was unlike anything Julian had ever seen. The walls themselves seemed alive with bioluminescence, responding to the emotional energies of the assembled council members. Their combined light created an ever-shifting aurora that made him feel as though he were standing inside a living rainbow. Naira stood beside him, her own skin pulsing with a mix of proud gold and nervous violet. Unlike their private moments in the pool, she now wore the formal attire of her people, a translucent robe that enhanced rather than concealed her natural luminescence. Commander Nash, the head counselor, addressed him, her ancient skin displaying patterns of such complexity that Julian could barely follow them. Your interaction with Naira has created quite a stir among our people. The energy signatures you produce together are unprecedented. Julian straightened, falling back on his diplomatic training. I understand this is unusual, Counselor, but I believe it represents an opportunity for both our species. Unusual? Another council member's skin flashed with skeptical patterns. It should be impossible. Our species' neural patterns are fundamentally different. Yet somehow, he gestured to the data displays floating in the air around them, showing complex energy readings Julian couldn't begin to interpret. Naira stepped forward, her colors shifting to confident blues and greens. Perhaps that's exactly why it works, she suggested. We've always assumed compatibility required similarity. What if the opposite is true? What if our differences are what allow for this unique resonance? The chamber's bioluminescence pulsed with increased intensity as the council members communicated in their species' natural way, through patterns of light and color that Julian could only partially comprehend. He watched, fascinated, as entire conversations played out in milliseconds through the exchange of complex luminescent signals. Suddenly, the chamber's lights dimmed dramatically. A new figure had entered, one whose presence caused Naira's colors to drain to pale blue. "Sovereign researcher Vex," she whispered to Julian, head of the Purity movement. The newcomer's skin displayed stark, aggressive patterns of red and black, colors Julian hadn't seen any other Luminian produce. "This is precisely what I've warned against," Vex announced, his voice carrying harmonic undertones that made Julian's teeth ache. "We're not merely studying this aberration, we're celebrating it." "Careful, sovereign researcher," the head counselor cautioned, her patterns showing diplomatic restraint. "Commander Nash is an honored guest." "He is a contamination," Vex countered, his skin strobing with angry patterns. "And this connection with Naira is a corruption of our natural resonance. Look at these readings. The energy patterns are mutating, becoming something neither human nor Luminian. If this continues, it could fundamentally alter our species' neural architecture." Julian felt Naira tense beside him, her skin flickering with suppressed anger. He reached for her hand, not caring about the gasps this public display of contact produced. Where their skin met, the now familiar patterns of light bloomed. But this time, they spread beyond just Naira's skin. The entire chamber's bioluminescence began to pulse in harmony with their combined energy. The council members' colors shifted to shows of wonder and surprise. Even Vex fell silent, his hostile patterns momentarily disrupted by genuine scientific curiosity. "Remarkable," the head counselor breathed. "The resonance, it's affecting our environmental systems. This goes beyond mere compatibility. Your connection is actually influencing fundamental Luminian technology." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The chamber's lights shifted to emergency patterns as a voice came over the communication system. "Unknown vessels approaching." Energy signatures matched the Shade Collective. The council erupted in patterns of fear and concern. Julian turned to Naira, seeing his own alarm reflected in her rapidly shifting colors. The Shade Collective, a group of rogue scientists who had found ways to corrupt and weaponize bioluminescent energy. They'd been attacking isolated outposts across the sector, stealing research data and leaving destruction in their wake. The station's defensive systems are not responding. One of the technicians reported, their skin pulsing with panic. "They found a way to disrupt our light-based technology." Vex's colors showed grim satisfaction. "This is what comes of mixing with outsiders. We've made ourselves vulnerable." But Julian was watching Naira, whose colors had shifted to something he'd never seen before. A deep, determined intensity that seemed to draw light inward rather than emit it. "No," she said firmly. "This is what comes of isolation, of refusing to adapt and grow." She turned to Julian. "Remember how our energy patterns created something new, something neither human nor Luminian." Understanding dawned. Something the Shade Collective wouldn't be prepared for. Julian finished. He squeezed her hand, watching as their combined energy patterns began to shift and evolve. The head counselor's colors showed sudden hope. "The defense grid, it responds to Luminian energy patterns. If you could create something new, something the collective couldn't predict or counter." "It's dangerous," Naira warned, her skin showing concern even as she maintained the deep, focused patterns. "We've never tried to consciously direct this energy. We don't know what it might do to either of us." Julian met her gaze steadily. "Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most important discoveries," he said, echoing her words from their first meeting. Around them, the chamber's lights began to pulse with their combined rhythm as they prepared to face whatever came next. Together, unity through adversity. The Shade-collected ships loomed in the viewport like dark stars, their hulls absorbing rather than reflecting light. Inside the council chamber, Julian and Naira stood at the center of a hastily arranged array of energy conductors, their hands clasped tightly as Luminian technicians worked frantically around them. "Their primary attack will target our photonic matrices," one technician reported, their skin flickering with urgent patterns. "Without those, our defensive systems are useless." Julian felt Naira's hand tighten in his. Her skin was cycling through colors he'd never seen before, creating patterns that seemed to bend the light around them. "We need to synchronize perfectly," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the chamber's crystalline structures. "Like in the pool, but much stronger." "The pool," Julian repeated thoughtfully. "Could we use it? It's designed to amplify Luminian energy patterns, isn't it?" The head counselor's colors shifted to show sudden inspiration. "The Aquatic Center's biological matrix. It's not just for recreation. It's one of our most sophisticated organic computing systems, and it already responds to our combined energy," Naira added, her patterns brightening with hope. "If we could channel that response through the station's defensive grid." They didn't have time for a more detailed plan. The first attack came as a wave of anti-light, a darkness that seemed to consume the station's natural luminescence. The chamber's glow dimmed dramatically, and Julian heard several Luminians cry out in distress as their own bioluminescence flickered. "Move. Now," Vex ordered, his earlier hostility forgotten in the face of immediate danger. His own powerful patterns created a path of stable light through the darkening chamber, leading them toward the Aquatic Center. They ran through corridors that were rapidly losing their glow, past panicked station residents, and grim-faced security personnel. Julian's diplomatic training had never prepared him for anything like this, but somehow, running hand in hand with Naira, he felt more certain of his path than ever before. The Aquatic Center was eerily beautiful in the emergency lighting, the living water pulsing with its own subtle radiance. As they approached the pool's edge, Julian saw patterns forming in the liquid that matched the ones flowing across Naira's skin. "No time for protocols," the head counselor announced, her colors showing decisive action. "Get in, both of you. We'll modulate the pool's biological matrix to amplify whatever energy you create." Julian didn't hesitate, still holding Naira's hand. He plunged into the living water. The sensation was even more intense than usual. Every molecule seemed to vibrate with potential energy, responding to their presence in new and powerful ways. Naira's free hand traced patterns in the water that instantly became more than mere ripples. Light and energy followed her touch, creating complex geometric forms that hung suspended in the liquid around them. "Now," she instructed Julian, "remember how it feels when we connect. But this time, don't hold anything back." The station shuddered as another wave of anti-light struck. Through the dome above, Julian could see the Shade Collective's ships moving into attack position. The darkness they emanated seemed to eat away at the very stars. Julian focused on Naira, on the unique energy they created together. He thought of their first meeting, of midnight swims and shared discoveries, of the way her colors changed when he made her laugh. He poured every memory, every emotion into their connection. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Naira's skin blazed with light so bright it should have been blinding, but somehow Julian could still see every intricate pattern. The pool around them began to glow with the same intensity, the living water responding to their combined energy in ways that defied physics. Through their linked hands, Julian could almost feel what Naira was feeling. The exhilaration, the fear, the deep well of power she was drawing upon. Their heartbeats synchronized, creating a resonance that spread through the water and into the station's infrastructure. "It's working," someone shouted. "The defensive grid is receiving their energy pattern." On the main display, they could see their combined power spreading through the station's systems. Where the Shade Collective's anti-light touched it, instead of being consumed, it adapted, creating new patterns that the darkness couldn't corrupt. But the effort was tremendous. Julian could feel Naira trembling, her color starting to fade from the strain. Without thinking, he pulled her closer, wrapping both arms around her. "Together," he whispered. "Remember, we're stronger together." Their embrace created a new surge of energy, different from anything before. It wasn't just light. It was something entirely new, a fusion of human determination and Luminian luminescence that defied classification. The station's defensive systems, powered by their unique energy, began to push back against the Shade Collective's attack. Beams of hybrid light lanced out from the station's arrays, cutting through the artificial darkness with ease. Impossible, Vex breathed, his own patterns showing stunned disbelief. The energy readings, they're off every known scale. Through the dome, they watched as their combined power forced the Shade Collective ships back. Where their light touched the dark vessels, it left glowing patches that spread like a beneficial infection, transforming the light-absorbing hulls into radiating crystals. But victory had its price. As the last Shade Collective ship retreated, Julian felt Naira go limp in his arms, her bright patterns fading to a dim flicker. His own consciousness was fading, the effort of channeling so much energy taking its toll on his human physiology. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Naira's face, her colors weak but showing pure joy as she whispered, "We did it, my love. We showed them what we could create together." A new dawn. Julian awoke in the station's medical bay, surrounded by softly pulsing biolights that reminded him of Naira's gentler patterns. His first conscious thought was of her, and he tried to sit up despite his body's protests. "Easy there, Commander," a human doctor said, gently pushing him back down. "Your cellular structure is still stabilizing after that energy surge." "Naira," he managed to ask, his voice rough. "I'm here." Her voice came from his right, and he turned to see her reclining on a specialized medical pod. Her skin was showing pale, delicate patterns, weak but steadily strengthening. "Though I must say, when I first invited you for a swim, I didn't expect it to end quite like this." The doctor looked between them with barely concealed fascination. "What you two did, it's revolutionary. The energy patterns you generated have permanently altered the station's defensive systems. And that's not all." She gestured to a display showing complex biological readings. "Your physiologies have changed." "Changed?" Julian asked, noticing for the first time that he could see subtle luminescent patterns flowing beneath his own skin. Nothing like Naira's dramatic displays, but definitely not normal for a human. "The intense energy exchange seems to have triggered adaptive mutations in both of you," the doctor explained. "Commander Nash is showing signs of bioluminescent capability, while Naira's neural patterns have partially reconfigured to match human wavelengths. You've essentially evolved to become more compatible with each other." Before they could process this information, the door slid open to admit the head counselor, and, surprisingly, Vex. The sovereign researcher's patterns showed something Julian had never seen from him before: humility. "Commander Nash, Naira," Vex began, his colors shifting in what appeared to be embarrassment. "I owe you both an apology. I was so focused on preserving our purity that I failed to see the potential in change, in growth." His patterns rippled with sincerity. "What you achieved together wasn't a corruption of our nature. It was an evolution." The head counselor's colors showed pleased agreement. "The Shade Collective's attack proved that isolation makes us vulnerable. But you showed us another path. Your connection created something entirely new, a perfect fusion of human resilience and Luminian energy manipulation." "The defensive systems?" Naira asked, her patterns strengthening as she spoke. "Completely transformed," the head counselor confirmed. "The hybrid energy you generated has created a new type of photonic matrix, one that adapts and grows stronger in response to threats. Several other stations have already requested to study and implement similar modifications." Julian managed to sit up, supported by the doctor. "And the Shade Collective?" "Retreated to the outer sectors," Vex reported, his patterns showing satisfaction. "Their anti-light technology is useless against your hybrid energy. But more importantly, your achievement has sparked a movement among our people. The younger generation especially is fascinated by the possibility of deeper connections with other species." "Which brings us to our proposal," the head counselor said, her colors shifting to formal patterns. "We would like to establish a new division within the Science Council, one dedicated to studying and promoting positive evolution through interspecies connection, and we'd like you both to lead it." Julian looked at Naira, seeing his own surprise reflected in her brightening patterns. "Both of us? Who better? The head counselor asked. You've already proven that the strongest defense comes not from isolation, but from unity. Your connection has changed not just you, but our entire understanding of what's possible. Naira's colors shifted to show joy tinged with uncertainty as she looked at Julian. It would mean staying on the station permanently, she said softly. Making this your home. Julian reached out to take her hand, watching with wonder as both their skins lit up at the contact, his with a subtle glow, hers with brilliant patterns of love and hope. Home is wherever we're together, he said simply. Months later, Julian stood in the transformed aquatic center, watching as humans and Luminians swam together in the living water. The pool had been modified to accommodate regular cultural exchange sessions, though none could quite replicate the unique energy he and Naira generated. Speaking of whom, Julian smiled as familiar patterns of light approached from behind. Naira wrapped her arms around him, her skin showing the deep, content colors he'd come to associate with their quieter moments together. Thinking deep thoughts? She asked, resting her head on his shoulder. Just appreciating how much has changed, he replied, placing his hands over hers and watching their combined bioluminescence create beautiful patterns. Who would have thought that one late-night swim would lead to all this? Naira laughed, the sound still carrying that musical quality that had first enchanted him. Well, I did have some hopes when I first saw you, she admitted, her colors showing playful mischief. Though I didn't exactly plan on us saving the station, transforming both our species, and revolutionizing interstellar relations. No regrets, though. She turned him to face her, her patterns showing pure love and certainty. Never. Every new pattern we create together is more beautiful than the last. Above them, through the crystalline dome, the stars shone brightly on a station that had become a symbol of unity throughout the sector. In the pool below, more humans and Luminians were discovering their own unique connections, creating new patterns of light and possibility. Julian pulled Naira close, their combined glow reflecting off the water's surface. Together, they had proven that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't light or darkness, but the willingness to embrace change and grow together. Their story had started with a simple swim, but it had evolved into something that would light the way for generations to come.